Zombie Reddit, today's story is...
My sister joked that her son looked like my husband. What I discovered after installing software on his phone revealed a family secret that nobody wanted to accept. I have always considered Thanksgiving my favorite holiday. There is a special magic in those gatherings, where the family comes together to share stories and catch up, generating an inner feeling of warmth. My family clan, with all its quirks, loves each other deeply, although they tend to push their jokes too far. I usually laugh with them knowing that they don't mean any harm. They have always been like that, playing jokes on each other over insignificant matters and pushing boundaries. But they are my family, and I love them. This year, however, I experienced a strange premonition as I got ready. The usual enthusiasm was absent, replaced by an unpleasant feeling that I couldn't identify. Maybe it was just anxiety, I told myself. Family celebrations can be unpredictable, but we always ended up with happy expressions. The evening began properly, or so it seemed. My sister Olivia was particularly lively. She has always been the life and soul of any gathering, cracking jokes left, right, and center, and this occasion was no different. Dad was carving the turkey while Mom was taking care of the side dishes, and we were all settling into the familiar rhythm of our family meals. The first jibes about my marriage seemed harmless, the kind of comments I had learned to dismiss. Someone joked about how I had gotten a husband with better culinary skills than I had. Since he had experience in the kitchen, he was always sent to help out during gatherings. I laughed it off. But as the evening progressed, the jokes started to get more hurtful. I was reaching for the stuffing when Olivia smiled and made her big comment of the night. She mentioned something about how her son, Nathan, had my husband's eyes. The room erupted in laughter before I could respond. It was that kind of rising, all-enveloping, sonorous, overwhelming laughter. I stood motionless, my hand suspended over my plate and feeling heat on my face. Nathan has large, expressive eyes, but to compare them to my husband's, I couldn't believe she was saying it out loud, and even less that everyone found it funny. The laughter didn't stop quickly either. Mom added something about how it wasn't just the eyes. Maybe Nathan had also inherited something of my husband's attractiveness. That only intensified the laughter. I watched my husband standing in the kitchen doorway, wiping his hands on a cloth. I didn't know if he had heard, but he looked uncomfortable. I couldn't bear it. I couldn't manage to remain seated, pretending normality. The laughter was still echoing when I got up. My chair squeaked loudly against the floor. The room fell silent. I muttered something about needing some fresh air and left, ignoring his protests. My husband shouted my name as I was getting my coat at the door. I felt his gaze as I opened the door and stepped out into the November cold, but he didn't follow me. I got into my car and drove aimlessly for a while. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The scene repeated itself in my mind. How everyone had laughed, how my sister had smiled, how my husband had just stood there watching. I continued trying to convince myself that it didn't mean anything, just an unfortunate joke that went too far. But why did it feel like something completely different? When I finally returned home, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Olivia's voice, that implicit smile in her tone as she uttered those words. I kept telling myself that I was overreacting, that I was allowing a bad moment to ruin what should have been a pleasant evening. But no matter how hard I tried to rationalize it, the uneasiness in my chest persisted. The next morning, I told my husband all about it. I expected him to be furious with me and to say that Olivia had overstepped the mark and that I had done the right thing in leaving. Instead, he played it down. He said I shouldn't take it so seriously and that it was just Olivia being Olivia. He said they didn't mean to hurt, that it was their way of joking. I stared at him, waiting for him to say more and defend me. But he didn't. Instead, he told me I was overreacting and that I shouldn't let a stupid comment ruin my mood. And just like that, the sinking feeling in my stomach intensified. It wasn't just his words, it was his tone, the way he avoided my gaze, and how he seemed more interested in downplaying than addressing my feelings. For the first time, I started questioning things I never wanted to question. Why didn't he say a word when Olivia made that joke? He acted like he hadn't heard it. But why did he seem so nervous standing there in the kitchen? When I asked him why his dismissal felt less like reassurance and more like evasion, I told myself I was being absurd. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. Am I overanalyzing? Am I being absurd? I need your opinion. Update 1. The days after Thanksgiving passed in a haze of unease. I couldn't shake the heaviness in my chest or the memory of the familiar laughter cutting through me like a knife. What tormented me most wasn't even his insensitive joke, but my husband's reaction. His dismissal of it as his typical terrible brand of humor left an uncomfortable uneasiness in my subconscious. I tried to push the feeling away, convincing myself that I was exaggerating, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't forget it. The more I thought about his response, the stranger it seemed, as if he were hiding something. And then there was Olivia, my sister, with her smile and that ridiculous joke. On its own, it was in poor taste, albeit harmless, but combined with the way my husband stood there, silent and uncomfortable, it made my stomach churn. Over the next few days, I found myself revisiting old memories, and suddenly, things I had dismissed as insignificant began to take on a different shape. There was that time Olivia joked about how she and my husband got along better than he and I ever had. I laughed then, attributing it to her usual over-the-top humor, but now that memory ate at me. And then there were the shared glances I had caught between them over the years. Nothing completely inappropriate, at least not that I had noticed, but moments that suddenly seemed too intimate. Little details that I had previously ignored now emerged in a new and disturbing light. It happened that Christmas when we played charades, and Olivia and my husband teamed up. They were almost unbeatable, guessing each other's clues with an ease that seemed almost intimate to me. I felt left out then, but I laughed, telling myself it was all in fun. Now that memory felt like a weight pressing down on my chest. Desperate to calm the mental storm, I started to review old photos and social media posts. I kept telling myself that I was being irrational, but I couldn't stop. I examined photographs of family gatherings, trying to prove myself wrong, looking for some reassurance that I was just being paranoid, but I found elements that only made my concern worse. There they were, too close to each other in numerous photographs. Olivia's hand on his arm in one image, both of them laughing in the background of another. His descriptions in some posts seemed innocent on the surface, but they took on a strange nuance now. "Always fun hanging out with my favorite brother-in-law," read one of his posts, with a winking emoji. I continued scrolling, feeling tightness in my chest with each post I discovered. The signs weren't obvious, but they were there, like faint cracks running through a seemingly solid foundation. It wasn't just the images either. I started to remember casual comments Olivia had made, things that seemed flirtatious in retrospect. Like when she joked that if I ever made a mistake, she'd be happy to take my place. Everyone laughed, including me. I considered it harmless then, but now it felt completely different. The accumulated weight was unbearable, and I couldn't keep it to myself any longer. One night I confronted my husband, trying to keep my voice calm, but my frustration and anxiety were seeping through. I asked him about the jokes, the photos, if he thought Olivia had ever crossed a line. He sighed dismissively and said I was letting my imagination run wild. He reminded me that Olivia always joked without any hidden agenda. When I pressed him, asking why he didn't stand up for me at Thanksgiving or why he seemed so uncomfortable, he dismissed it. He said he didn't want to cause a scene and thought it was best to ignore it. So he had heard what they said, yet the next day he acted as if he hadn't. His words sounded reasonable, but his tone did not. There was something in his manner that suggested he was avoiding something deeper. I asked him directly if he considered Olivia's behavior inappropriate, and he hesitated before answering. That hesitation felt like a slap in the face. He finally denied it, saying that I was exaggerating and needed to forget about it. But the way he said it, how he tensed his voice and averted his gaze, only intensified the sinking feeling in my stomach. That night, lying in bed looking at the ceiling, my mind raced through a range of dark possibilities. Was I being paranoid? Was I overinterpreting insignificant things? Or was there something real underlying it all? Something that my instinct had detected long before my mind understood? I didn't know what terrified me more, the idea of imagining it all or the possibility that I might not be wrong. Half of you suggest that I investigate further, and the other half think it might not be serious, but it's better to confirm than to regret later. I think you're right. It's better to clarify now than to regret later. Update 2. I spent the following weeks trying to rebuild my life. But the more I searched for answers, the more I felt suffocated in my own home. The disturbing feeling that had built up since Thanksgiving had evolved into something darker, something that caused me chest pain that no rational thought could alleviate. I tried to confront my husband again, but every time I did, he belittled me. He dismissed it as if I were being unreasonable, as if my suspicions were some made-up fantasy. "You're thinking too much," he would say, or "you need to trust me more." Every time he said those words, I felt more distant from him, as if the man I thought I knew had become a stranger. But there was something about these financial transactions that intrigued me. The numbers seemed wrong. Over the past few months, I had noticed large, unexplained transfers from my husband's account to my sister's. It was subtle at first, small amounts scattered about, but as I continued to check, the sums increased, and when I asked him about it, he explained that Olivia was experiencing financial difficulties and he was just helping her out. But I wasn't convinced. I knew my sister's financial situation. It wasn't serious enough to justify such amounts, and the amounts simply didn't make sense. I couldn't stand by and do nothing. I needed to know the truth, even if it meant facing something I wasn't prepared for. So I hired a private investigator. It was an impulsive decision that made my stomach churn, but I needed answers, and I didn't trust my husband to provide them. The investigator began to investigate, tracking every transaction and every lead. I installed software that the investigator had sent me on my husband's cell phone and laptop. Weeks later, I received a report that shook me to my core. The investigator had confirmed my fears. The affair had been going on for years. My husband and Olivia had a secret relationship hidden in plain sight. The child she had with my husband was not just a passing affair. He was hers. I sat contemplating the evidence as the world I thought I knew collapsed around me. There were photographs of them together, fragments of messages, and the results of paternity tests. It was easy to do. All I needed was some hair. My hands trembled as I looked at the report. The cold, hard facts confirmed all my fears. Breathing and thinking became difficult. The pain was overwhelming, a crushing wave that left me drowning in betrayal. My heart was breaking. I could only sit staring at the damning evidence, unable to comprehend how the two people I trusted most could hurt me so deeply. I remembered all the moments I had overlooked. The little signals, the persistent touches, how my sister laughed exaggeratedly at my husband's jokes. I had seen it but didn't want to see it. And now it was in front of me, an inescapable truth. It wasn't just the affair or the lies. It was the child, my nephew, whom I had grown to love, and who was now a living reminder of the betrayal. I couldn't even look at photos of him without feeling sick. I had played the role of loving aunt while my husband secretly played the role of father. I needed to talk to someone to process all this before I completely lost my sanity. I called my best friend, who knew my family almost as well as I did. We had been through everything together, and she had always been my confidant. When I told her what had happened, she was initially silent. I could hear her breathing on the other end as if she were searching for the right words. "I knew something was wrong," she finally said in a soft voice, "but I never imagined it would be this." I asked her what she meant, and she explained that for years there had been rumors about my husband and Olivia. People had whispered about it, but no one dared to confirm it. They dismissed them as too absurd. "They have always been so close, you know," she said, disbelief in her voice. But nobody wanted to believe it. It was too much to take in. I felt devastated all over again. There had been rumors that everyone ignored, but I didn't know about them. I had been blind, living in a false sense of security. Well, the two people I trusted the most destroyed everything I had built. I hung up feeling numb. My head was spinning with the weight of it all. The betrayal didn't just lie in what had happened, it encompassed everything that had gone before. My marriage, my sister, my family, everything had been built on lies, and now it was all crumbling before me. I couldn't stay in this house any longer. The walls seemed to close in. The weight of it all was crushing me. I needed space. I hated them. And above all, I needed to decide what to do next. I wasn't going to be a naive doormat. I would make sure they paid. Update 3. You were all right. I had to confront them. I wanted to understand how they could be so sick, so disgusting. The day finally came. I had all the necessary evidence, photographs, financial records, and the results of paternity tests. I organized a meeting at my house, neutral territory. My hands trembled as I set the table, as if I were preparing dinner instead of a battle for the very foundations of my existence. My sister and my husband were on their way, and I could feel the weight of their arrival weighing down on me. He picked her up on the way home from his office, naturally. When the doorbell rang, I almost didn't want to answer it, but I took a deep breath, prepared myself, and opened the door. They were both there, wearing that familiar mask of normality. My sister with her wide, radiant smile, my husband with his usual carefree appearance, but there was an air of tension in the atmosphere. The discomfort was palpable, and neither of them could hide it, no matter how hard they tried. They knew. I indicated that they should sit down, and they obeyed cautiously, exchanging uncomfortable looks. I sat down opposite them, a dense silence occupying the space between us. I watched them with contained fury burning beneath the surface and told them that I knew everything. I didn't need to add anything else. The photographs, bank statements, messages, paternity test results, I had it all laid out before them. I pushed a pile of evidence across the table, each document landing in front of them like a bomb. Their faces paled. My husband shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his gaze turning to my sister, who looked close to fainting. There was no escape now. They had to face up to their actions. They didn't expect me to know, much less to confront them so directly. I sat up slowly, walking around the room as I spoke, feeling the weight of my words pressing down on them. I started with the photographs, the moments I had considered insignificant at the time, the ones I had previously dismissed. Each image seemed to accuse them. The closeness, the shared glances that now seemed so much more meaningful. I didn't need to explain the intimate images. The evidence spoke for itself. When I presented the paternity results, the room seemed to shrink. They couldn't even look at me now. I didn't wait for their answers. I couldn't wait for their excuses, lies, or defenses. The damage was done. I told them that this was what they had been hiding, and that there was no more pretending. They both remained silent for a moment. The guilt was written on their faces, but neither of them spoke. Finally, my husband broke the silence. His voice was tense, almost whispering. He told me that it hadn't been planned, that it was just a mistake, a stupid, irreversible mistake. He said that he had never wanted it to progress so far, that he had tried to stop it, but had been weak. I couldn't contain the fury that came over me. He dared to tell me that it wasn't planned, that it was simply a mistake. I denied it in disbelief. I asked him to stop, that I didn't want to hear his excuses. He didn't try to stop anything. He allowed it to continue for years. He lied, and now, with everything exposed, he was still trying to minimize it. My sister was next. She had remained silent, her head bowed, tears rolling down her cheeks. She wiped them away with the back of her hand, but her face was a mask of shame. She told me she was sorry, that she never wanted to hurt me. She claimed to have been confused, that it was a bad moment, and she didn't know what she was doing. I let out a bitter laugh, impossible to contain. Confused? I exclaimed, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. You had an affair with my husband for years, and now you tell me it was just a moment of weakness? That's your excuse? What are you, a teenager? Even they know better. She had no answer, just more tears. She went on to say that she didn't mean for it to happen, that she never wanted to hurt me. Her apologies were worthless, the truth was before us, and nothing could reverse it. Frustration boiled up inside me, and I couldn't keep looking at her without seeing the betrayal in her eyes. I told her that she had destroyed everything. My trust, my family, my marriage, and for what? Some fleeting moment of weakness prolonged over years while she frequented clubs and my husband? Was she really that desperate? Could nothing satisfy her? I told her it wasn't just a mistake, but a choice to hurt me, a choice to ruin my life. I was furious. I told her that even escorts were more respectable than her. Her sobbing increased, but it no longer moved me. The woman who was supposed to be my sister had betrayed me in the worst possible way. She had broken something irreparable. I turned my gaze to my husband, now visibly crumbling under the weight of his actions. His face was pale, his eyes full of regret, but it didn't matter anymore. He had no right to feel sorry for himself. He had caused this to us, to our family, and no apology could change that. He told me he didn't know what to say, that he couldn't undo what he had done, but he would do anything to make amends. How wrong he was. There was no solution. Trust had been lost, and no apology could restore it. I asked him to stop, that I didn't want him to try to fix it because it was too late. There were no more opportunities or excuses. He had crossed the line, and now it was time to face the consequences. I wouldn't allow myself to be manipulated again. With that, I got up and left the room, leaving them behind. I didn't look back. It was pointless. I had nothing more to say to them. They had already taken everything from me. Update 4. The days following the confrontation were quiet, disturbingly silent. The pain and betrayal persisted inside me, eroding my resolve. I reflected on the years of love, trust, and sacrifice, invested in a marriage that turned out to be a lie. I thought of my sister, my own blood, who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I didn't want to continue being a victim. I was done with the sadness, the humiliation, the seething rage. It was time to take control, to make them pay. I wasn't just looking to redress the balance. I wanted to make sure they never forgot what they did to me. I wouldn't allow this to go unnoticed. My husband and my sister would be exposed as the heartless people they were. I no longer worried about their fate. In fact, I anticipated the consequences. I started by attacking their professional lives. I had community contacts, people capable of spreading information quickly. The images of my husband and my sister close together, intimate and far beyond what is considered innocent, served my purpose perfectly. I distributed them anonymously on social networks, tagging everyone, making sure they reached their workplaces, friends, family, and anyone interested in their lives. The reaction was immediate. My husband's company fired him within days. As soon as the photos were circulated, his career was over. His colleagues, many of them accomplices in silencing their affair, suddenly turned against him. He had tried to keep it hidden, but now the truth was out. As for my sister, her boutique was no longer a refuge. The shame of the affair and her part in destroying my marriage was too much for her clients to ignore. Her important clients, who spent thousands on her services, quickly distanced themselves. Rumors spread quickly and her business collapsed. There was no one left to support her. The women who had previously considered her a confidant now avoided her completely. My sister tried to play the victim, but no one believed her anymore. News of her ruin reached me through family members. The revenge didn't end there. My other nephew, my cousin's son, who had always been close to me, took matters into his own hands. Seeing me so devastated, he went to the school and spread the rumor that Nathan was the result of infidelity, that his mother had betrayed his sister by sleeping with her husband for years. He told them everything, even claiming that the son of the affair had known the identity of his real father all along, but visited my house without any shame, pretending innocence. The rumor generated laughter and then mockery. The poor boy became the target of every cruel joke. The students made him the butt of their ruthless taunts, asking him if he had always known the truth or if his father had revealed it to him. The mockery continued to spread throughout the school. His life became unbearable. He was no longer just the son of an infidelity. He was the living reminder of my sister's and my husband's betrayal. Initially, I felt guilt at the magnitude of what had happened. The child did not deserve such cruelty. But when I learned that he knew the truth, that he knew about his father, the affair, and the lies, that he had kept the secret, in my eyes he became an accomplice, like my husband and my sister. I could no longer feel sorry for him. He had participated in my suffering. Now he had to face the consequences of the choices of his treacherous parents. The compassion I had once felt for him vanished, replaced by a cold and implacable bitterness. The divorce proceedings were brutal. My lawyer knew exactly how to exploit the years of deceit. The affair was not just about betrayal. It was the basis of my case. A second paternity test confirmed that the child belonged to my husband, giving me all the ammunition I needed. I was entitled to everything: the house, the money, the joint accounts. My husband left with nothing except his shame and the consequences of his decisions. However, it was not over. Not even close. My father, the perpetually stoic man in our family, finally lost his temper. When my sister returned begging for forgiveness, he slapped her in front of the child of the affair. The sound echoed around the room, and for the first time I watched the usually calm and collected man lose control. He called it the worst mistake of his life. His voice trembled with anger, and it was clear to everyone present that he felt nothing but disgust towards her. My mother remained silent. She simply stood there, understanding that for my father to react like that, the betrayal was deeper than imagined. Their attempt at reconciliation and reparation was nothing more than a desperate effort to save their reputations. Nobody cared about their apologies. Nobody wanted to hear them beg for forgiveness. My family stood by me. Even my mother claimed that I was her daughter before Nathan was her grandson. Everyone knew that Nathan also knew the truth. There was no going back. My husband and my sister were left isolated, with nothing but the consequences of their actions. I watched it all unfold with grim satisfaction. No regrets, no doubts. I had waited too long for this. In the end, I didn't need their apologies, I just needed them to understand the depth of the pain they had caused me. I didn't need closure. The satisfaction of knowing that their lives would never be the same again was enough. That the disaster they had created would never go away, and contemplating their misery gave me pleasure. Sometimes justice does not come from forgiveness. Sometimes it comes from seeing those who hurt you get exactly what they deserve. And I had made sure that this was the case.